chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. Those who have been on the Zoom for Sunday morning know what we're doing. We've been studying through Luke, and we're just going to continue with that study. We're in verse 7 today. It says, "And he began speaking a parable to the invited guests. When he noticed how they had been picking out the places of honor at the table, saying to them," and what he noticed was they were all vying for position at the table. And of course, those who thought that they were of great importance were seeking out the best seats, or the chief seats, the most important seats. And others were vying with them. They were in competition with each other. And this is typical of worldly attitudes. It's all about who is the most important, who is going to be recognized as the most important, and they're all pushing their way into these positions where they will be seen of men as being important. So we all know what he's talking about. We've all experienced it in one way or another. And he says to them, this is Jesus speaking now, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him." Now, some of these rabbis had no problem putting themselves on the main table where the bride and the groom were and all the relatives were. Now, in Catholic weddings, the priest is usually up there anyway. Part and parcel of how they recognise him. So things haven't changed that much. But the very fact that they would push themselves up into that position when they hadn't even been asked to sit at that table. Maybe their seat was at another table altogether. And they don't want to be sitting where they were put. They want to be recognised as important in this gathering. So, there were squabbles. You can better believe it that there were squabbles. "No, you get out. That's not your seat. I'm taking this. No, you're not taking that. That's for somebody else." And you know the usual things between human beings. And who do you think you are? Do you not know who I am? You know, those questions. Do you not know who I am? What are you saying? You're saying, "What? I'm so important, you need to recognize my importance. Because I'm so important." And here's what was going on there. He says, "For someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him." Well, that's it, you see. If the bride and groom had worked out who they wanted to be close to them, what tables they wanted them at, it should be their choice, not somebody who's just walked in as to where he wants to sit and what he wants to do. That's just arrogance, that is. Disgraceful arrogance. And then if there's somebody that comes in where he's sitting was actually placed in that seat, or was to be placed in that seat, he's glad enough. He doesn't know. It's like when you get on an airplane and somebody's sitting in your seat and you're looking at the number and you're sitting in my seat. "Oh, no, not her." "Yes, you are." Call the stewardess. "You're sitting in my seat. Would you move up, please? This is not your seat. Let me have a look at your ticket." "No, you're down the back there." So it does happen, and we know it does happen for sure. So, in verse 9 he says, "And he who invites you, both will come and say to you, give your place to this man, and then in disgrace you proceed to occupy the last place. So all the bartering for prominence and preeminence ends up to where the person who is so full of themselves is now in front of all the other guests, is asked to move out of that place because it was reserved for somebody more important, and go down at the end there where you were supposed to be sitting. So it says in disgrace. I think he's saying that the people there would see it as disgraceful that he was grabbing a chair that didn't belong to him and a position that he didn't hold, and that now that he was corrected, he had to get up in humiliation and disgrace and walk all the way down to where he didn't want to be in the first place. He says in verse 10, when you are invited, go and recline at the last place, so that when the one who has invited you to come, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will have honour in the sight of all who are at the table with you. Well, this has been twisted in Irish society. They know about this teaching. And a lot of people who are wily think, well, I'll go into that last place. I know he can't leave me there. So if I go there, he's going to have to come and tell me, here's your place, and bring me up to a place of honour. So he gets the buzz out of it. That's the charge that he wanted. That's the recognition that he desired in his heart when he walked in the door. That's his approval, so to speak. But that's not what the Lord is saying to you. He's not saying, you don't think I'm saying to you, be crafty, be ahead of the posse here. Do it this way, and you'll get what you want in the first place. What you wanted in the first place is wrong. Just look for the seat that is assigned to you, and take it, and be happy with it. Don't start playing games so that you might be recognised one way or the other. So, but if it happens that you were in the wrong seat and the host comes down and says, look, we didn't want you sitting there, we wanted you to sit up here near to the top table. I mean, you would say, well, thanks very much, that's very nice. But if you're not looking for recognition, you just say thanks very much. If you're looking for recognition, you'll be walking up there looking at everybody. And there you go. He says, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Humility was something I really believe from reading the Old Testament and reading the history of the Jewish people, that they never grasped the idea of humility. Now, I'm sure some of them did, especially those who were really devoted to God, spiritually minded, the prophets for that matter. They were humble men. They had to be, to accept what God was asking them to do in the face of the pride and the arrogance of the people that they were dealing with. But he's trying to get it through to everybody. Humble yourself. An attitude of humility. Humility goes before honour. And they didn't accept that. They didn't accept that at all. But it's the whole attitude of heart that Jesus is getting at. And let's look at Matthew chapter 6. It says in verse 1, beware of practicing your righteousness before men. Now watch this, to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. Now this brings out the seriousness of looking for recognition for yourself. If you want the approval of man, if that's what you want, if that's what you get, he says that's all you get. You will not get the approval of God. You will not get the approval of God. So when you give to the poor, he says, do not sound a trumpet before yourself as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honoured by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. And you see, that's what they don't know. That's what they don't recognise. They'll have their reward in full. Yeah, men will praise you. Others will think, how would I say, highly of you. They'll give you compliments. They might be stabbing you behind the back with everybody else, but in front of your face, you are the man or you're the woman. Surely everybody should recognise your talents and that you are head and shoulders above everybody else. He says that that's what you want, that's what you'll get, but that's all you'll get. That's all you'll get. He says in verse 5, when you pray, you are not to be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners, so that they may be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. It's really interesting to see this. Look at Matthew chapter 23 now, and you'll see how prevalent it was among the priestly caste. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore all that they tell you do and observe, but do not do according to their deeds, but they say things and do not do them. They tie up heavy burdens, he says, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to remove them with so much as a finger. But when they do all their deeds, there's no point there, it says, but they do all their deeds to be noticed by men. For they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments. They used to have these big prayer boxes sitting on the top of their head with a band tied at the back here. They had scriptures in it. But of course they couldn't just have an ordinary little box. It's laughable, but it was very serious for them. And they lengthened the tassels of their garments. So everybody might have a border that size, but they had a border this size. To be different, to be noticed. They love, it says, the place of honour at banquets and at chief seats in the synagogues, and respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by men. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father who is in heaven. Do not be called leaders, for one is your leader, that is Christ. But the greatest among you shall be your servant, he says. Humility and servanthood go together. So if you're humble, you're not looking for recognition from the people that you're talking to, or the people who are looking at you, or in any situation that you're in. You're just being yourself. You don't need to be anybody else. You're happy that you're yourself. God knows who you are. You know God knows who I am. These others need to know who I am, and I'm not looking for attention. That's just it. But they loved. I remember the priests when I was a kid. They had to take off or salute the priest when you saw him in the streets. All the men would take off their hat as he was walking by. They did have the high seats or the chief seats at weddings and at other gatherings. And even when there was meetings, say a school meeting, where he came in to speak about school business, not about church business, they all stood up like it was God's walked into the room. And there's some of the more sensible ones that just say, look, we're here. It's not mass. This is just a meeting, a school meeting. Just sit down, we'll be okay. But you see, that's just the instinct. That's the instinct. They had it so drummed into us that we would automatically give them that sort of recognition. So this attitude of heart is very much alive in the present day. Very much alive indeed. Now, why were they doing it? To be noticed by men. To get the approval of men. And why would they want to do that? Well, you see, they think they're special. They think they're very special. They think that there's nobody that can compare with them. That they are a one-off. And that everybody should see this. And that everybody should understand their talents and abilities and capabilities. That they would recognize it as they do. And maybe they are talented. Maybe they've got a breadth of knowledge which others don't have. And that happens. There's people who have photographic memories. And they're able to recall things that they read in books. I mean, they're able to recall things in a way that is impressive. Make no mistake, impressive. So God's given you a gift. You might be able to retain and to recall what you've read, what you know. You might be able to remember things that other people will not remember or whatever. There's other things like physical prowess in sports, and you've got ability in sports, or you're good looking, or you're beautiful, or you think you have great ideas and everybody should know about them. You have physical strength, self-confidence. Maybe you're a business person and you're very successful. And so it inflates our ego. But we're not satisfied that we have an inflated ego. We have to impose it on everybody else, and everybody else is forced to recognize it. What people forget is, where did Solomon get his wisdom from? It was God. He gave him a breadth of mind that others did not have. People from all over the world were coming to Jerusalem to hear the wisdom of Solomon. The Queen of Sheba came, and she says she was mightily impressed with everything that he was speaking about and informing her on. So here's Solomon now with that ability beyond what other people had, and they recognized it. And so did Solomon. And so did Solomon. Now, the problem was that in the early days, Solomon was a humble man. But it didn't last. It didn't last. He got big-headed. He went against the commandments of God. He was doing things that were absolutely forbidden in the scriptures. And he was leading an idolatrous life because of the influence of his wives and his concubines. But all the gifts and the talents we have, whether it's that sort of wisdom or as it says in Exodus chapter 36, let's have a look at Exodus chapter 36. And just read from verse 30 in chapter 35 and then Read the first two verses in chapter 36. Then Moses said to the sons of Israel, see, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And he has filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all craftsmanship, to make designs for working in gold, and in silver, and in bronze, and in the cutting of stones for settings, and in the carving of wood, so as to perform in every inventive work. He also had put in his heart to teach both he and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. And he has filled them with a skill to perform every work of an engraver and of a designer and of the embroiderer in blue and in purple and in scarlet material and fine linen, and of a weaver as performers of every work and makers of designs. Now, Bezalel and Aholiab and every skillful person in whom the Lord has put skill and understanding to know how to perform all the work in the construction of the sanctuary shall perform in accordance with all that the Lord has commanded them. And that's just the whole all of it. If you've got an ability, if you've got a skill, if you have wisdom, if you are a great mechanic, if you're good at doing books, and you're good at that, at figures and things like that, if you're able to write books and you're good with words and language, God has blessed you with it. God has given it to you. Don't be ashamed of it. Be thankful to God for what you are and for the gifts and the talents that you've got. But understand this, that just as the gifts of the Spirit were given, the miraculous gifts of the Spirit were given, and we're told in 1 Corinthians 12 that it was for the common good. It was for the common good. It was not to inflate your ego. It was not to make you better than anybody else. It was for you to use for the benefit of your fellow man and for the glory of God, not for anything else. For the benefit of your fellow man and the glory of God. That's why you are given the talents you've got. And you need to start thinking in those terms. If we have jealousy in our hearts and selfish ambition, we're in deep trouble. We're into the game of rivalry. We're into the game of competition. We're into the game of one-upmanship. We're into the game that is nasty in the extreme. Remember when the Pharisee and publican went up to the temple to pray, in chapter 18? And the Pharisee, thank God I'm not like other men. And guess who he was looking at? Like this sinner. I mean, it's one thing to think you are so great. It's another thing to start trampling on other feet and other people and putting them under your feet because you're so great. And that's exactly what he was doing. The poor man, when he got his chance, he beat his breast and said, simple thing, God be merciful to me, a sinner. And how right he was. And how that prayer should come out of our mouths more than it does. God be merciful to me, a sinner. Who went down to the house justified? Before God, I mean. Not before man. Oh, the Pharisee was saying, bragging about how he fasts twice a week and all the rest of it. And people who heard him would think, what a holy man. What a great man this is. Sucked in by the nonsense. Sucked in by the nonsense. But God heard the prayer of that whole man who recognized that he was just nothing more than a sinner, which is the truth for all of us. I'm a sinner who needs to be forgiven. Okay. So, the gifts that we are to use, whether they're spiritual or otherwise, are to be used for the common good. Let's look at 1 Peter chapter 4. In verse 10 he says, as each one has received a special gift, and the word special there is written in, as each one has received a gift. What's your gift? Do you know what your gift is? What can you do that might help other people and that might service the church? Do you know that the church is a family? This congregation is supposed to be a family. Each person is supposed to feel, I have an obligation towards the body of Christ and to my fellow Christians. I need to be working out, how can I do something for the church so that my fellow Christian will be benefited by what I'm doing? That's what we have to start thinking. You say, well, I haven't got a gift. Well, can you vacuum? Can you use a vacuum cleaner? No. Can you use a brush and a scoop? No. One way or the other, you've got something you can do. And we can all start to look out for things we can do. If you're walking out of this building and you see all those books on the floor, why not try and pick them up and put them on a chair? What about the toilets? What about the grass? What about all the other things that need to be done? What about encouraging each other? Do you come here to be encouraged or to encourage? Do you come here to be recognised or to recognise others? Do you come here feeling a responsibility to build up your fellow Christian in this congregation, to build them up, to be spiritually minded with them, to pray with them, to talk to them about their problems, or let them talk to you about their problems, to listen, to care, to love, to show mercy and kindness? This is what's supposed to be happening. Now, we couldn't do it over the last 5 months. And so much of last year we couldn't do it either. But now we're back. Let's get back with a real conviction. Let's get back with a real conviction. And take your responsibility just as we're supposed to. He says in verse 10, as each one has received a gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Whoever speaks is to speak as it were the utterances of God. Whoever serves is to do so as one who is serving by the strength which God supplied, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belongs the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Even in our good works, whether they're inside the congregation or outside the congregation, there's one purpose in our minds for doing it, and that is to benefit our fellow man and to glorify our God in heaven. And he says in Matthew chapter 5, and let's see, verse 16. He says, let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Just two things in Proverbs. Proverbs 27 verse 2 for a start. Proverbs 27 verse 2, and then we'll finish up. It says there, let another praise you, and not your own mouth. Listen to that. Let somebody else be the one to praise you, to see what you're doing, to know you as a person, to respect you, to honour you. Let somebody else do it. But in order for that to happen, you've got to be doing something. They have to see who you are and what you're doing to be able to praise you. So, the idea then is Let them praise you, and not your own lips. Don't be too quick to say how great you are, and how wonderful you are, and how perfect everything is in your life, and how you are accomplishing so many things. You may be, and that's good. But you don't have to blow a trumpet before you about everything that you're doing and who you are. That's for sure. And then the last one I want is Matthew 25, Proverbs 25, verse 27, where he says, "It is not good to eat much honey," he says, "nor is it glory to search out one's own glory." Nor is it glory to search out one's own glory. In truth, we haven't got it. But where we do have in serving the Lord, let it be seen by all men that you are serving the Lord, and that it is not your idea to serve yourself. And that's the message. I'm going to leave it there for today. And God bless you. And I hope this little lesson will help you and make you a better Christian. Certainly make you more